Okay, we're coming up on the top of the hour. I think if all of our speakers are ready, I think we're ready to begin.
Okie dokie.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Partner Solutions webinar, Best Practices for Creating and Managing Your Chamber of Commerce Foundation. I'm Beth Bronder from ACCE, and I am looking forward to our discussion today, and thank everybody for joining us. As I mentioned to our speakers, we've had tremendous response and interest in this topic. We've done a number of webinars in the past, and it seems to be one of these topics where people just completely engage and want to know how they can do things better or do things differently. Today, we'll be hearing from two experts about how they launched, operate, and manage their Chamber of Commerce Foundation. I'm confident that you'll walk away today with some practical things that can help you with yours. First off, I have to thank the wonderful partners at Acrosoft for helping make this program today a reality, and also thank them for inviting our speakers. We have worked with Acrosoft for over a decade now, and they maintain and are helping us with a relaunch of our website, which we're all very excited about. And for those of you that don't know, they offer a full suite of website, marketing, sales, membership, and finance software specifically tailored for chambers. So they are one of our closest partners, and we thank them for their support and for making this program possible. Before I hand things over to our speakers, I'm going to just do a couple quick housekeeping items that will make today flow a little bit better and make it more productive for everyone. I like to keep a pretty tight ship, so we'll be doing a 50-minute program today, which will include plenty of time for questions and answers. Please submit your questions anytime during our program today in the chat box, and we will get to as many as we can in the 50-minute time period. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be emailed to you within 24 to 48 hours and also available on our website under professional development. Please feel free to share broadly with your staff and your peers. Contact information for today's speakers can be found in the chat. So if you want to reach out to anybody directly, please feel free to do that. And then before we start, one thing that we would like to do is launch a couple poll questions to get an idea of where you are in your development. It's a nice way to set the table for today's discussion. So our first poll question is, which best describes your chamber foundation? We don't have one, but we're considering one. Our foundation is launching soon. Our foundation is less than 2 years old. Our foundation is more than 2 years old. We got about 80% of the votes in. Give it a few more seconds. We appreciate this. Jeff and speakers, you're getting a sense, I think, that we've got some folks that are in established foundations. Okay, we're going to end that one. And I'm going to go to our second poll question. What is the one takeaway you hope to leave today's webinar with? New funding strategies, ideas about staffing your foundation, managing competing goals between your chamber and your foundation, the legal and tax implications of a 501c3, or all of the above? Okay, we got some ground to cover today, I think. All of the above. We'll give it a few more seconds. Appreciate everybody doing that. And you can see where we are. Okay, with that, and thank you for that. It makes our job a lot easier, and it helps us tailor our programming today towards where you are and what kinds of information you need. So with that, I'm going to introduce our speakers. We have three experts here today to share their knowledge. First, we have Sandy Baruha from the Detroit Regional Chamber, where he's president and CEO. The Detroit Regional Chamber is actually the third largest chamber in the country, which is pretty interesting and pretty exciting for us. We also have Meredith Rosansky, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the Bowling Green Area Chamber of Commerce. And we have Jeff Klein, the President and CEO of Acrosoft, our sponsor today and longtime partner. Jeff is going to moderate today and also walk us through the question and answer period. So I'm going to hand things over to Jeff. He can get us kicked off and get our speakers ready to roll. Jeff?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Beth, and welcome to everyone. And first, I want to welcome everyone to today's webinar. I've been really excited about today's webinar because of our speakers specifically. On one side, we have Sandy, who is President, CEO of one of the largest chambers and best run chambers in the country. And then on the other side, we have Meredith with the Bowling Green Chamber, and they are a medium to small size chamber, and she's the COO. So she has her sleeves rolled up and she's in the day-to-day business. So we have a great range of speakers. Also, Bowling Green's been recognized several times as best run chamber in the country or chamber of the year. So we've been very excited about that. Before we begin, one of the things that we've been working hard on is really thinking through how we can first stand on the shoulders of last month's webinar on foundations, in which Kelly Wolf spoke about strategic planning. Today, we really want to move the conversation from Kelly's excellent presentation last month to this month, in which we're going to take a practical approach. What we want is for you as attendees to walk away with gold nuggets, that 1, 2, 3, 5 gold nuggets from this event that made this event totally worth it. So we're going to go very deep into very practical approaches to running a foundation. So with that, I'd like to start with Sandy. Sandy, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and the chamber.
Well, hey, thanks so much, Jeff, and thanks for inviting me to be part of this. And I'm really looking forward to presenting alongside with Meredith and learning a lot from others as well, too, because I'm not sure how much I'm going to add to it. But I've been with the Detroit Chamber for a little over 10 years now. And I came from a Washington background. I spent most of my career in national politics, working for both Presidents Bush, 41 and 43, grew up on the Hill as a Hill rat, but kind of in between there, I guess you can say during the Clinton years, I used my MBA and hooked up with a mergers and acquisitions firm, and we did a lot of M&A work, especially in the financial services industry across the country. So I kind of had a role in government, at the federal level. Been worked for some businesses, and now I am running for 10 plus years a nonprofit. So it's been a fabulous experience being at the chamber. When we wrapped up shop in January of 2009, when President Obama was inaugurated, I frankly wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. In fact, if you remember those days. It was a really difficult time with the financial crisis, and our entire team. I was a direct report to the president at the time. We were focused on the financial crisis, so none of us really had time to be focused on kind of our own resumes and what we wanted to do next. And when January 20th rolled around and our card keys no longer worked in the building, it was time for us to kind of figure out what we wanted to do next. And fortunately, about a year and a half, 2 years later, got the opportunity to run the Detroit Regional Chamber. And frankly, I was one of those chamber executives that came in not from chamber world and frankly knew very little about chamber world. Had a strong relationship with the U.S. Chamber, but now that I'm in the role, I couldn't imagine doing anything else. Really enjoying it.
Thank you, Sandy. And now if you would tell us a little bit about the foundation.
Sure, happy to. So By the way, I just want to say, thanks to everyone. I'm really looking forward to hearing questions and learning from this. When Jeff invited me to do this, of course, I said yes, because he usually calls to ask me if I'll wash his car, which I'm obviously happy to do, but this is so much better of an assignment. But frankly, when Jeff asked me the question, it really occurred to me that I hadn't given much thought to the strategic role our foundation plays and how we execute our mission in the 11 county area that we serve. Frankly, no one's ever asked me the question. So I really kind of had to think about it for a bit. So our chamber was established in 1981. So those initial conversations that led to its formation, the understanding of what X our predecessors in their early 1980s power ties and big hair were trying to solve for, were likely buried in meeting notes, locked away in storage, or perhaps lost forever. But as I thought about it, it was certainly easy to recognize that having a foundation has been a real strategic, frankly, even a competitive advantage for our organization. Without it, we certainly couldn't execute the mission that our organization is responsible for at the level that we do today. But it was also clear to me that while the advantages are clearly evident in having a foundation in our day-to-day work, I'd really never given much thought to how else we could use our 501c3 status. So that's why I'm really looking forward to our discussion, in large part because I want to hear what others are doing. When I talked to Kevin about preparing for this topic, I commented that having our chamber foundation was a little bit like having a car in the garage that we only drive around the block, and that I've never really opened up the hood to see what else it might be capable of.
Good.
So some real basics. Our foundation exists as a tool to extend our chamber's mission to position our region for economic growth and success. Sounds very familiar, I'm sure, to all of you. Officially, both our 501c3 and our 501c6 have purpose statements very similar to powering the economy of Southeast Michigan, but frankly, that's dated language and we really don't use it anymore. A good way to think about the delineation between what goes on in our 501c6 versus our 501c3 is today versus tomorrow. Issues or programs that are today in nature, such as day-to-day combat in the legislature, executing events, all of our COVID response programs, and of course, operations and internal services like HR, marketing, media relations, etc., all reside in the Chamber 501c6. Our foundation houses all of our tomorrow programs. For example, while government affairs certainly resides in our 501c6 to allow the day-to-day advocacy in Lansing, Washington, City Hall, etc., our long-term policy development initiative called Michigan 2030, which looks out 20 or 30 years, resides in our 501c3. The four primary areas of our foundation are: one, economic prosperity programs, which include our industry cluster associations in automotive, mobility, defense, and aerospace; talent and education, and here we have quite a large portfolio, but most notably in this space, we run something called the Detroit Promise, which, as the Promise term indicates, is a universal college access program for all students living just in the city of Detroit. And it's one of our programs that is just focused on the city of Detroit as opposed to the broader region we represent. Our development leadership programs reside in the foundation, as well as our data and research apparatus. A fifth element we added in 2020 is our racial justice and economic equity work and our partnership with the Gallup Center on Black Voices. Certainly the common element of these initiatives that they're all focused on addressing long-term challenges, and that's what we use our foundation for. And of course, programs like this generate much more interest from corporate and philanthropic foundations, and those organizations find it far easier to support financially a 501c3 as opposed to a 501c6. And the same can be said actually for some government entities as well too. So having a foundation makes it easier to gain support from corporate and philanthropic foundations for events, yes, events as well. And maybe some of you are doing the same thing. So while certainly events usually is a 501c6 activity, at least in our world, the way we get major event support from philanthropic foundations and actually the state of Michigan is to create 501c3 eligible content portions that allow these entities to write a check to our 501c3 to execute a 501c3 eligible program within a broader event agenda. Obviously, this is kind of all prior to COVID land. And the foundation makes it easier for those organizations to do business with us. And so having these tomorrow-focused programs in our foundation allows us more avenues for financial support, certainly lowers our tax bill, we all know that, and provides the chamber brand a more altruistic patina than just an organization that simply wants to lower taxes on business. We can go to the next slide, please. This slide says that our foundation has 18 employees, and that's probably accurate enough for any non-legal proceeding. The reason this number is a little fuzzy is that we have several employees that reside in both places. And again, those of you with foundations, this will be very similar. An easy example is our VP for Education and Talent. While most of his salary comes from the foundation, as most of his programs are funded through foundation dollars, as the VP of the chamber overall, a portion of his salary comes from the 501c6 to recognize his overall organizational leadership responsibilities. And this is true for programs themselves. For example, Machado, which is our statewide automotive mobility industry cluster association, has most of their dedicated employees in the foundation, but the executive director, who's also chamber VP, is split between the foundation and the 501c6, but their advocacy person is paid exclusively out of the 501c6 to allow for the advocacy work. So our automotive program has a foot in both camps, allowing it to engage in advocacy, but still executing most of its functions within the 501c3 status. Again, for those of you with existing foundations, this model is going to sound very, very familiar. So all in all, it's about 15 employees, full-time employees in the foundation, with another 7 or so that have some portion of their foot or some portion of their paycheck in both camps. And that's out of currently 79 total employees in our organization overall. Our biggest challenges for 2021, including we're now dealing with our second year in a row without our single largest fundraising event, and that impacts both our 501c3 and 501c6. We're struggling some when it comes to new dollar fundraising for our programs in the foundation, which certainly doesn't help matters. And finally, we're building our new racial justice and economic equity initiative, which frankly is looking to be one of the largest initiatives that we're going to tackle during my tenure in this role. So with that, I will turn it back over and look forward to the broader group discussion.
Thank you very much, Sandy. That was very informative. Meredith, if you would tell us a little bit about yourself and the Bowling Green Chamber, please.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Meredith Brzezinski. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer here at the Bowling Green Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm a CPA by trade. I have a master's degree in accounting. Started my professional career in public accounting, I think as most do. Actually lucked into a position as the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer of the Pensacola Area Chamber of Commerce. They were a longtime audit client, spent 10 years there. And I spent a couple years in manufacturing, worked for a company called Avalex Technologies that makes digital video recorders and mapping systems primarily for military and law enforcement. So that gets to my family background. So that was very near and dear to my heart. But I very much miss the community building aspect of being associated with the chamber and really being able to see a tangible benefit of the work that you do within the community. And so was presented with the opportunity here in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and snapped it up. I've been here now about 8 years, so about 18 years total between the two chambers, both of which have had very active chambers of foundations associated with our chambers. And here at this chamber, we run a total of 6 different entities. 2 of them are 501c3 foundations, and the majority of the others are either public or private economic development organizations. And so we, unlike the Detroit Chamber, we don't have dedicated staff strictly for the foundation. We do split, which you'll see in just a few minutes. So our foundation was founded in 2008. The original purpose of the foundation was to build the facility we currently are housed in. Since we are a combined chamber economic development organization, they really wanted a facility that was representative of the city we wanted to become at the time. So they built us what we sort of joke as the Taj Mahal. We were the first building in our downtown tip at the time. It is a beautiful facility, 100% paid for by the private sector, which we are very grateful for. And then, so once that project was complete, we really turned our efforts to, as Sandy was referring to, what's our future purpose? And obviously everybody globally is struggling with workforce and talent issues. So this foundation is now the house of all of our education related initiatives. So our mission, we explore, connect, and inspire. We want to keep it very short, very simple, and really, how do we inspire our current generation and next generation to connect our community, explore educational and career opportunities, and remain here in the Bowling Green area. If we go to the next slide, please. I did want to just go ahead and show you a breakdown of our budget for those of you that have smaller chambers of commerce. So we run our Leadership Bowling Green project through here. SCK Launch is our premier initiative. So it's actually an acronym. It stands for South Central Kentucky Learning About Unique and New Careers Here. So we started in 2011, raising $1.4 million from the private sector to be the first community in the country, and now we're the world, to implement Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People across 2 school districts, K through 12. And then in 2016, we started a very intentional conversation of how do we layer career exploration and opportunities on top of that leadership foundation. So that's how we came up with SCK Launch. And then our sort of other program income is just some like training modules and online training tools that we sell subscriptions to. So this shows you the breakdown. As I said before, we don't have any of our chamber employees directly run through the foundation. It would be cost prohibitive to try to mirror our benefit structure with the foundation. And so it is strictly a management fee annually that comes over from the foundation to the chamber. And that's how we run all of our other organizations. Everyone that works for us is a chamber employee. If you'll go to the next slide. So there are 4 of us that are shared. Myself, our Director of Education and Workforce. We have a program coordinator. And then the contract grant writer is actually run 100% through the foundation. So her monthly retainer fee comes out of that. In 2021, this is both our biggest initiative and sort of a great, terrible timing, if you will, with COVID-19. In January of 2021, we kicked off our second 5-year capital campaign to raise $2.5 million to sustain our SCK Launch efforts. Obviously, it was going great until March when COVID hit. So we have sort of hit the pause button on that. In the meantime, we switched over and have spent our efforts with our grant writer writing more towards national corporate grants, and have been very successful in doing that over the past year. So that has sustained us, and we have not taken a big hit in 2020 as a lot of chambers and foundations have. So knock on wood, we're still holding good ground, and we are anticipating ramping our capital campaign back up this May. So I will be going out with our group of volunteers that are community leaders to go out and solicit those campaigns. We primarily receive funding from our local businesses. We do have quite a few individual investors. I want to say for our last campaign, of our 200 investors, about 45% of them were individuals. So we do have a good mix between the two. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Meredith. And now everyone sees why I was so excited about today's webinar, because of the great expertise and the diversity of our speakers. With that, there is a lot of interest about staffing. We're getting a lot of questions from the audience. So let's just start. Sandy, I know you already touched on this, but as you look, it sounds as if you have 18 employees within the foundation. 3 are shared, the other 15 are full-time. If you just quickly, could you break down their roles in terms of how many are in fundraising versus finance and the management of the accounting issues?
Yeah, fair enough. So it's probably, if you look at it in terms of FTEs, it's probably more than that. Like I said, it's probably about 17 total, roughly about 15 full-time in the foundation itself. So if you're in the foundation full-time, then that means all of your work is directly related to one of those 501c3 programs. So for example, you know, any one of our kind of education or leadership programs, like Leadership Detroit is a longtime leadership program that is completely a 501c3 activity. And the two people we have in our leadership program are exclusively 501c3 employees. However, all of the services that like say event support, you know, finance, marketing, etc., all of those kind of in-house support operations are in the 501c6. And so, you know, there's obviously, you know, transfers between the two and kind of, you know, cost agreements. I saw in the chat, do we mark up costs? No, we're just charging ourselves. So we just kind of do it as a flat fee. So that's kind of how that works. All of the operational stuff is in the 501c6. We do have employees obviously in both camps.
Wonderful. And Meredith, before I transition to the way in which you break up your staff, if we could go to the poll question, and if everyone would answer this: what will be the primary purpose of the foundation? Very good. And Meredith, you have 4 employees and they are shared. What are the roles of those employees?
Well, one, our grant writer is specifically for the foundation. If we do have her work on something that's not foundation related, we bill for that separately, and that entity is billed directly for that time and effort. Our Director of Education and Workforce, I would say 95% of her time is spent on foundation related activities. Obviously, you can see from the management fee, we're charging $46,000 a year. That isn't enough to pay salary and benefits for any of our employees, but we want to be fair to the foundation and understand that, you know, this is something that's important to the chamber board and to the foundation board. And so the chamber is willing to absorb the costs and basically have a loss, if you will, related to this effort, because of the time and energy it takes because of the importance to our community. So I saw the question about how's the sort of management fee calculated. It's not 100% based on what salary is. What we try to take into consideration is time and effort spent on the various components. So how much time and effort does it look that is related to Leadership Bowling Green, to SEK launch, and the programs and events that it takes to put those on. But we're also cognizant of making sure that there's enough funding in the foundation to make the foundation whole. So it's not a 100% allocation. So Sandra is our Director of Education and Workforce, spends about 95% of her time on foundation related items. We have a program coordinator, which backs Sandra and I up. I would say she spends about 60% of her time on foundation related issues. The other 40% on her time she's also our social media guru for the chamber. So she does a lot of chamber related activities with the marketing department. And then myself, I always joke with everybody, if your title is COO at a chamber, that means you do everything nobody else wants to do. So the foundation ends up, while it's the favorite part of my time, it's really about 25% of my time and effort of what I'm able to allocate towards those efforts. And then we do have a grant writer that's on retainer. I saw the question about that too. We pay her $2,400 a month. It is for an allocation of time. So there are some months where we don't have as many grants to apply for. So she has sort of bank time. And then we have other times where we have larger grants if we're going after, big national grants or federal grants. They take a little more time. And so we'll use that bank time. So it's not a strict allocation. We pay her a flat $2,400 a month, but we track the time separately.
And Sandy, with your grant writer, first of all, do you have a grant writer? And if so, how is the grant writer compensated? Is it salary, hourly, or is there some type of performance bonuses?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on the area. So for our education, not necessarily talent, but our education, peer education work, we do have a staff member who has grant writing skills that is just part of her day-to-day responsibilities. If we have to if we're going to do a grant in a different area, let's say talent or leadership or something else like that, we will generally work with our fundraising consultant who has a grant writer as part of their organization, and either that's wrapped up into our monthly retainer with our fundraising consultant, or we'll just pay them directly with an agreement amongst all three parties.
Very good. And what about the decision to add staff? Do you have any type of metrics or anything that kind of triggers when you need to add staff, Meredith?
We don't have a set metric. When we decided that we were going to grow our education efforts, obviously we needed to hire somebody with that expertise. Sandra, as a 33-year veteran of the education industry, has a great deal of experience working both in the classroom and also at the state level. So we were lucky to find her and bring her on. Over time, as the initiative grew and took on legs, we advocated for being able to bring on a coordinator. So it's really been more ad hoc over time as the workload increases, as the revenue associated with the event and activity increases. Otherwise, we were borrowing and stealing time from other staff members at the chamber.
And this is for you, Sandy. Have you found that there's any advantages or disadvantages to expensing salaries to the foundation versus the chamber?
Yeah, so I mean, the general rule is that you want as many costs as possible put in your highest taxed entity, and we do actually have a for-profit entity in addition to the 501c3 and 501c6, and you want to put as many expenses as possible. As much revenue as possible through your lowest taxed entity. So, we have a fairly large finance staff. It's about 8 people total, and then we've got obviously our tax consultant and our general counsel as well. And frankly, I just let them handle all those questions. Meredith is probably in a much better position to answer those kinds of questions than I am. But it is, I know it's complicated, and I try to keep up. I probably don't do a very good job of it.
Meredith?
Well, I mean, that's going to differ by entity, and two, not every chamber, some of the chambers that are on this call may not even have a foundation yet, or the chamber and the foundation may be the only 2 entities that they're dealing with. So how they structure their foundation when they apply to be a 501c3 and when they put down what it's going to be used for, ensuring that they're adhering to what they told the IRS was the purpose of their organization, and making sure that they're not putting any costs or revenue sources in it that don't align with that mission. The last thing you want to do is jeopardize your 501c3 status because somebody wasn't clear on what the mission was that you originally applied for. I mean, I have seen chambers get themselves into trouble with that. They get into mission creep, or somebody thinks, I think this is a charitable thing because it's charitable to me. Well, that might not be the letter of the law to the IRS. And so you always want to make sure it's very hard to get status back once it's been revoked. So you always want to make sure that if you haven't set up your foundation, that you're very clear on why you're doing it. And if you have set up your foundation and maybe you're retooling like we did from going from a capital campaign for a facility to being an education foundation, that you're doing that in the right way with the proper legal counsel, and then that your accounting staff then understands the rules and regulations related to how you currently set it up.
Yeah, and Jeff,
Wonderful.
I'll just add, I think what Meredith just said is hugely important, and I'm sure others with foundations would say the exact same thing. But the diligence that is necessary to keep the line straight between the 501c3 and the 501c6 are hugely important. And where you can really get tripped up is not so much in the broad execution of a program, but it is kind of the activities of individual staff attached to that program. So for example, our automotive industry cluster association, we're really careful there because most of the work is 501c3 related, but we do have an advocacy arm, which is 501c6. And we have to structure that entity very, very carefully. We have to monitor the time because we do have an advocacy person, full-time advocacy person, just for automotive issues that's paid out of the 501c6. It's really important that you dot the I's and cross the T's, not just do the right thing, but make sure that you are documenting all of those things. And that's one of the reasons why we have so many people in our finance staff, is to monitor those things and make sure that we're executing those things well. Fortunately, since the foundation has been such just kind of part of the air of our organization, going back to the early 1980s, everyone pretty much gets the joke, but it does take constant vigilance.
Thank you very much. Let's move the conversation from staffing to another extremely important topic, and that's funding. What are your strategies and tactics towards obtaining local funding? Meredith?
Well, we've done 2 capital campaigns now. Both of those are multi-year commitments. Our local business community is very supportive. This is very much a chamber town. So when we launch an initiative through our foundation, we ensure that we've got the business community at the table on the ground level, so that they're our community leaders advocating for it before it's really even off the ground. And then we make sure we've got sort of our go-to team that goes out with me as we're meeting with different companies. But we're also making sure that our programming in the foundation is relevant to what they're saying they need. We spend a lot of time talking with our business community, especially given our economic development arm, about where are their pain points, what are they seeing. As I said before, talent is a global issue. And we firmly believe that the first community to figure out how to do this right wins, and we want to be a winner. We've been the fastest growing city in the state for the last decade, and we want to continue that. And so making sure that your programming is relevant. And once you do that, the fundraising ask is very easy. Plus, given the fact that our efforts primarily with SCK Launch are centered around K-12 education, there are very few people that aren't impacted by children, either through being parents, being grandparents, or at one time having had those. And so that individual ask is a lot easier. I think it would be harder if we were to diversify more into adult education, which is what our separate 501c3 training consortium primarily does, is training related to adults.
And Meredith, do you target locally corporate philanthropy, community foundations, and high net worth individuals in the community?
We do corporate philanthropy, so there are several foundations that we apply to on a regular, reoccurring basis. We are the home of the Corvette. General Motors obviously has a big presence here, and we get an annual allocation of about $10,000 from them. So we do have those relationships like that with corporations that are longstanding here in our community that we write annually to their foundations. And we do have several high worth individuals that are very passionate about what we're doing with the students that are donating. We don't really go too much after the community foundation funds.
Very good. And Sandy, what about the targeting of local funding for your chamber? How much of your revenue comes from targeting locally? And where is that revenue coming from? Just high level.
Yeah, great question. I would say for our foundation revenue, I would say 60% of it comes from local foundations, either corporate, philanthropic, or our community foundation. In fact, our community foundation is very engaged in the scholarship program that we run, and 40% comes from national sources, national foundations.
Very good. And are there any specific local organizations or individuals that you're targeting? Do you find that most of it's coming from corporate or high net worth individuals? In terms of just sharing funding strategies with the rest of the audience, locally, where is the vast majority of your revenue coming from?
So it really depends. So for example, our automotive initiative, Mish Auto, a big chunk of that funding comes from the automotive companies directly, oftentimes from their foundations, because most of them have a foundation themselves. And frankly, putting that work in our foundation makes it a lot easier as a 501c3 to accept those corporate foundation dollars. So for our automotive work, it's coming from the automotive industry in one way or another. For say our talent development work, that's where you kind of you quickly understand what the local and national landscape is for issues around education. And within education, we all know that there are sub issues, right? Early learning, K through 12, higher ed, adult education completion. There's all so many different foundations have different angles on that, and you get to know those pretty quickly. So I think it really kind of depends on the stream of work. Like our leadership programs, that's much more diffuse in terms of where the money's coming from. That's partly corporate foundations, but it's also partly philanthropic foundation. And that, my guess is that's probably 50-50. Our education work is pretty much exclusively philanthropic foundation. Some of our other work is around education and talent is a little bit more mixed. So it really kind of depends. I'm sorry, I'm not giving you a great answer.
No, you are. And just by the way, I love the GM connection with Detroit being the headquarters and then the Corvette being headquartered in Bowling Green. So what a great connection there.
Well, I think Meredith probably has a better line on getting an employee discount on a new Corvette than I do. So
I keep trying, Kai, the plant manager, every time I see him, I'm like, I know you're bringing it today, right?
Very good. But obviously, fundraising is the centerpiece to running a successful foundation. If we were to look at the amount of revenue that comes in from just general fundraising versus grants, what percentage of your overall revenue comes from grants, Meredith? And just a ballpark, just trying to get a feel, is it 10%, 30%, 50%?
It's hard to tell in the fact that it fluctuates from year to year. So in a typical year, I would say probably 20 to 30% maybe of our funding comes from a grant. Now we did have a special circumstance a couple of years ago. Our state had some leftover youth funds through their WIOA funds, and they had solicited from all of the workforce boards some ideas for additional things that they could fund. They didn't really like any of the things that came back to them from the workforce board. I knew the director at the state level very well, so he called me on the phone and said, how's SEK launch going? Could you use some money? I'm like, yeah, I'll get you a proposal first thing in the morning. And so literally had a call with him at 6 o'clock at night. He called me at home. I shot him an email with an Excel spreadsheet breaking down about $243,000 worth of things that I could spend money on, assuming he would come back with one or two that he would fund, and he funded the whole thing. So, which I'll tell you, for those that are grant writers on the table, my grant writer was very upset with me. She was like, I spent hours writing all these grants and you fling an Excel spreadsheet and get $243,000.
I love that. Sandy, do you just have a rough idea of the breakdown of fundraising versus grants?
Yeah, so are you talking about just for the foundation? It's probably, grants are probably 35, 40%. Obviously, that's just that's just foundation revenue, not overall revenue. Overall revenue for grants is probably 15% at the most. That's my guess.
Very good. And then, because I believe obviously that funding is the centerpiece to the foundation. So spending a little bit more time on this, what about how do you identify and select successful fund writers or grant writers, excuse me? Meredith?
For us, I was going to say, we use them kind of, again, if it's education, basically, if it's education K through 12 or higher ed, we have that in-house. If it's for something else, we likely, work with our fundraising consultant. And if they don't have the right one on their team, we'll go out and find one. So it's really opportunistic or ad hoc, I would almost say, for us.
And Meredith?
Well, I have experience grant writing in my history. Sandra, our Director of Education and Workforce, actually wrote the nation's largest Race to the Top grant with $41 million. So she has a tremendous background in grant writing. And then our grant writer has more of a diverse background. She has a background similar to Sandy, where she came out of DC, worked for several different senators. So she's got a better breadth. She's good for us, though, of knowing all of the different channels where grant writers stock grant opportunities. So she is the one that facilitates finding the different grant opportunities that she thinks would align. And then Sandra and I work on getting her the content necessary to apply.
And Meredith, do you have any type of compensation based on performance, whether it's with the grant writers or any of the other fundraisers?
So with our grant writers, no, like I said, we have a flat amount that we pay her. So there's not a performance base there. Those that help me fundraise are volunteers, so we don't incentivize them. Through the chamber, we do have an incentive structure for our team. We have what we call a performance enhancement plan, but that's based on departmental goals. So each employee has the ability to earn up to 6% of their salary in bonus. Half of their bonus is based on the goals of the department in which they reside, and half is based on the average of the chamber as a whole. So we incentivize everyone to work together to achieve our goals, but that's separate through the chamber. It's not related directly to the foundation.
Sandy, do you compensate based on performance with your grant writers and or fundraisers at all?
Yeah, so we do have fundraisers on staff, and they're treated like every other staff person. And our, performance pay plan is very similar to Meredith's. Actually, we're a little bit more individually focused, based on individual goals. But those individual goals are obviously folded up into team goals and then organizational goals beyond that. So everyone has a performance plan. We have a very, I would call it, robust performance monitoring, performance appreciation system. And that seems to work out really well for us.
Thank you. Let's move to governance, if that would be okay. Who's on your foundation board, Sandy?
So great question. I think one of the reasons for creating the foundation back in the day was to have a home for people who have either termed out of their primary chamber board role, or they were, the CEO of their company when they were on the chamber board, but they had since retired, but we wanted to keep them engaged because they were a high net worth individual, or they still had, a significant, kind of a sway within the community. But really what the value of the foundation provides us is that it allows us to bring into our foundation board a different kind of voice, a different kind of perspective. So, our chamber board is exclusively C-suite, exclusively business. We don't have nonprofits. we have one university president on there, but we're actually doing something different with our education leaders. So that is soon to be almost exclusively business. So there are obviously, you know, tremendous nonprofit leaders, thought leaders, you know, think tank leaders that we want at the table to kind of infuse our chamber discussion. And our foundation board has been a fabulous, fabulous avenue for that. And kind of during my tenure here, we've kind of really kind of turbocharged that that element of getting a new, different set of voices into the chamber mix. And that's one of the things, frankly, that I've really appreciated about the Chamber Foundation, is being able to bring in those other voices, and frankly, having a home for some of those people who, you know, have termed out of their chamber board role.
Oh, I love that, Sandy. I think that's a gold nugget right there. And it's a way to continue the relationship and continue the involvement of key members, stakeholders, by allowing them to transition over to the foundation board. And Meredith, do you have a foundation board?
Yes, our foundation board is much smaller than our chamber board. It's 8 members strong. We had the mayor of the city of Bowling Green has been a long time chamber board member. He recently resigned from being mayor, but he's still on our foundation board because we went for connections, and he knows absolutely everyone. He's been here forever, and everyone loves him. And then our other board members, much like Sandy's, are C-suite executives in companies. And again, we look towards choosing our board members due to their connections and the various networks within the business community, so that we make sure that we've got somebody that can touch every sector, and both small and large businesses.
And do you have any board members that are, Meredith, on the chamber and the foundation?
We have 2 board members that overlap the chamber and the foundation.
Sandy, do you have any overlap?
We do not. Our foundation chair is a tier 1 automotive CEO who timed out of her role as a chamber board member, but we don't have any overlap.
And Sandy, was revenue for the foundation between 2019 versus 2020, was revenue up in 2020 or down for the foundation?
Yeah, Jeff, this is when I was going to have internet issues. So no, we're down. Overall, both our 501c3 and 501c6, because of our largest fundraising event, our overall revenue dropped from 20 to just under 18. So our 19 total was a little over 20, and for 2020, it was just under 18. So you see that net of 2+ that we're down, and that's kind of spread evenly between the foundation and the 501c6.
Meredith, revenue
on the foundation, we were down. We were down about 25%. But the reality is the majority of that was related to the events that we typically put on. So we do a major, what we call SEK launch experience. So it's a hands-on world's greatest trade show for 8th graders. We have about 4,500 8th graders that come through in a day. So that's a big revenue generator for our foundation. Due to COVID, because the schools were closed, we were not able to host that event. And then also last year, we were not able to do our big job fair for high school seniors that are separating, going direct into the workforce. This year, we are doing a virtual version of that. So we did sort of defer all that income and roll it forward into 2021. But we were down primarily due to our event stuff. Again, same thing with Leadership Bowling Green. And we had to defer our 2020 class to 2021 because nobody could meet in person. And so our balance sheet looked good because we had the money come in, but we had to defer all the income. So our income statement didn't look so great for 2020.
And does your chamber board appoint the foundation board, Meredith?
No, it does not.
Sandy?
It does for us.
So it does. So that's interesting. So it's.
And and I will say though, when I was in Pensacola, instead of having a separate foundation board, we just used the chamber executive committee as the board of the foundation.
Yeah, and Jeff, we do something a little interesting. I got to make sure I articulate this correctly. So The members of our foundation are our executive committee. So they're the members of the foundation. And then the foundation board is appointed by our chamber board, if that makes any sense.
It does. And Sandy, how does the chamber support your foundation and vice versa?
So that's a great question. So obviously the 501c6 is providing all of the services that make the foundation programs operational, right? So Meredith mentioned events, right? So obviously programs in the 501c3 are executing events of some sort. You know, they need support from our events team, our marketing team, communications, etc. So, you know, certainly there's support there. But, you know, again, kind of going back to my opening remarks, I mean, the way we look at our 501c3 foundation is that, okay, you know, how can we best position and attract, you know, the funding necessary to execute these programs? And, you know, to, you know, the extent possible, we want to put programs, especially those that are long range in focus, you know, the tomorrow programs, as I referred to, you know, how much of that work can we put in our foundation that makes it easier for philanthropic foundations, corporate foundations, or occasionally we get a little bit of government support, but very little. It's easier for them to support it through a 501c3 entity as opposed to a 501c6. So it's really, at the end of the day, kind of a fundraising tool, if you will. It's not a fundraising strategy, but it's a fundraising tool.
And to build upon Kelly Wolf's webinar last month, she was very focused on strategy. Meredith, how do you keep the chamber and the foundation's goals and missions aligned and prevent mission creep?
Well, obviously our 501c6, you know, we're the voice of the business community, and our business community, their largest need is talent. And so we want to make sure that we're attracting talent in a cohesive way, that we're retaining the talent we have. We are a university town, and so that was a natural fit. So for our efforts, it's a joint conversation between our foundation board and our chamber board related to our overall strategic plan, but then everybody has their piece. So our chamber board, once things become operational, are really champions of the foundation. They participate in our events, they're investors in what we do. But they're also great champions out in the community, because obviously our chamber board is a lot larger than our foundation board. Our foundation board really are those C-suite employers that are willing to roll up their sleeves, dive in, and help me go meet and ask for money.
Thank you. And we're just about out of time right now. So I first want to thank both Meredith and Sandy. I know how valuable your time is, and for you to give back to the chamber community is so deeply appreciated. And the gold nuggets and what you shared today, we know that foundation is a really hot topic, and what you shared today is extremely valuable, I'm sure, to all of the participants today. I also want to give a special thanks to ACCE, the wonderful job that Kellyanne and Beth and Will and Crystal and everybody over at the ACCE team does. We've worked with chambers for the past 20 years, and obviously businesses, because of COVID, are very challenged, and because of that, that trickles down to the chambers, because that's usually the biggest supporting entity. And candidly, I don't know how a chamber could survive without the overall assistance and insight that ACCE gives. So thank you, Beth, for sponsoring this. Thank you for the great job that ACCE does, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you for those kind words. We appreciate that so much. And, you know, we do what we do because we've got such great members. And I think we really saw that today from not only the engagement and the questions, but just the reaction to the speakers. And so with that, I want to thank Sandy and Meredith for sharing your expertise today. I feel like we probably could do another hour of questions here. because people were so engaged. Really appreciate that, and your peers appreciate it as well. Want to thank Jeff for moderating and keeping us moving here, keeping the questions answered. And just a reminder that this will be posted on our website. A recording of this webinar will be posted on the website, and we will also be sending it to you in email. So we want to thank you for making us part of your day. We hope to see you back here again for more programming. And if you want to see what we have upcoming, please go to the website under professional development, the calendar of events, and we look forward to getting everybody together again. Thank you everyone for your time. Please be safe out there and keep doing the good work of chambers and their foundations. Thank you,
Sandy,
everyone.
a personal
Thank you.
thank you. A personal thank you to you, Meredith,
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
so much.
Thanks,
you all.
everyone.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.